Hello everybody, Rick here, and I'm here at the Pima Air Space Museum in Tucson, Arizona. Today you will get to see some aircraft that you cannot see anywhere else in the world, as well as the fact that today is Vintage Military Vehicle Day. So you will get to see some things on wheels, as well as things with wings and rotors. And here we have a gate guard, the Douglas A4D 2N Skyhawk. The A4D2N was an improved version of the A4D2. The N designation represents the night capability delivered by the addition of a radar. This resulted in a slightly longer nose and pushed the aircraft length from 39 feet 4 inches to 40 feet 1 inch. With 3 external store stations, it could deliver weapon systems utilizing an improved weapons delivery system. Here's the main entrance. We're going to go in, get our tickets. Over there's the gift shop. Okay, no smoking allowed. As we come into the main hangar, the first thing we see is a replica of the Wright Flyer. The Wright Flyer first flew on December 17th, 1903. The Wright brothers made 4 attempts. The first flight lasted 12 seconds for a total distance of 120 feet, shorter than the wingspan of a Boeing 747. By the 4th flight, done by Wilbur, the last flight was 852 feet and lasted 59 seconds. It was longer than the previous 3 flights, which were 120, 175, and 200 feet. The landing broke the front elevator supports, which the Wrights hoped to repair for a possible 4-mile flight to Kitty Hawk Village. But soon after, a heavy gust picked up the Flyer and tumbled it end over end, damaging it beyond any hope of quick repair. It was never flown again. And once you step past the Wright Flyer, you are just confronted with some magnificent aircraft hanging from the ceilings and sitting on the floor. Just look at that. What a sight. And there are some gems in here too. Right there in front of us is an 052 Owl. And we will be taking a look at that very soon. And this is a Waco S-plane, model ZKS-2. These planes were very popular among civilian and commercial pilots in the 1930s. And some of these aircraft were pressed into service by the United States Army Air Force. That is a Tailorcraft BC-12D, and this is a Rutan model 61EZ. I will have more information on this rather interesting aircraft in just a bit. This interesting aircraft is the Star Bumblebee. On January 28, 1984, it set the record for being the world's smallest plane. In August of that year, the record would be broken by a partner of Robert Starr, who had the world's smallest monoplane. Thus, this became the world's smallest biplane. Starr would break that record himself on the 8th of May, 1988, with the Star Bumblebee 2. And this is a Pitts S1C Special. The Pitts Special, designated S1 and S2, were a series of light aerobatic biplanes designed by Curtis Pitts. They have accumulated many competition wins since their first flight in 1944. The Pitts biplanes dominated world aerobatic competition in the 1960s and 1970s, and even today remain a potent competition aircraft in the lower categories. This is the Curtiss 052 Owl. The 052 Owl was the last heavy observation aircraft developed for the U.S. Army Air Corps. The concept of a 2-seat observation aircraft dated back to World War I. But by 1941, the aircraft was no match for modern combat conditions. This is the Rutan Model 61EZ. It is a home-built aircraft with canard layout. It was first offered to home builders in 1976. This is the aircraft in which singer-songwriter John Denver lost his life. The NTSB cited Denver's unfamiliarity with the aircraft and his failure to have the aircraft refueled as casual factors in the accident. The aerodynamics of this unusual aircraft did not play a role in Denver's crash. And this is the tail assembly from a B-52D. My only guess as to how it got here was that it came off a B-52D that was cut up over at the Boneyard, which is really right across the street from the Pima Air Space Museum. And this is a T33A Shooting Star. It is made up in the markings of a T33A portraying a Yak-12 in the John Wayne and Janet Leigh film Jet Pilot. And there is the Duke himself, John Wayne. And this is an NF-4E Phantom II, number 66-0329. She served with the United States Air Force Thunderbirds from 1969 to 1973. Just look at the lines of this beautiful F-4 Phantom II. I tell you, there really is nothing quite like looking at a Phantom II. These things just look vicious. And there is a Mark V F-86 Sabre. And there is a MiG-15 UTI Faggot. And while I was on this side of the F-4 Phantom, I wanted to pan my camera around a bit. You probably just caught a sight of a motorcycle and a couple little cargo vehicles and an F-14 Tomcat. Now, right there is a cockpit trainer for an airliner, and there is a cockpit trainer for the A10 Warthog. I told you there were military vehicles here, and here is the first one. This is a Harley Davidson 42 WLA, produced in July 1942. The Harley Davidson was produced to U.S. Army specifications in the years during and around World War II. It was based on an existing civilian model, the WL, and is of the 45 Solo type, so called due to its 45 cubic inch engine displacement and single rider design. The WLA was produced in small numbers in 1940 as part of a general military expansion. The later entry of the United States into World War II saw significant increased production, with over 90,000 being produced during the war. Harley Davidson would also produce a close WLA variant for the Canadian Army called the WLC, and would also supply smaller numbers to the UK, South Africa, and other allies, as well as filling orders for different models from the Navy and Marine Corps. And this is a nuclear bomb. Big bada boom. This is the B-57 nuclear bomb, in service from 1963 to early 1990s. The B-57 was designed as a tactical strike bomb in depth charge that could be dropped by aircraft moving at a high rate of speed. Production of the bomb began in 1963, and it remained in service until the early 1990s. The bomb could be carried and dropped by most American combat aircraft. The basic bomb weighs about 500 pounds and produced a blast in the 5 to 20 kiloton range depending on the warhead used. And this is a U.S. military M274A2 truck platform utility half-ton 4x4, aka the Mule. The M274 was introduced in 1956 to supplement both half-ton trucks called Jeeps and 3/4-ton trucks, the Weapons Carrier Series and M37 Series, in airborne and infantry battalions. The M274 evolved from improvements to a vehicle designed at the end of World War II by Willys Overland as a medical evacuation litter carrier from areas and terrain that would even be a problem for its famous Jeep 2-axis. The M274 had no suspension aside from the low-pressure tires and the seat cushions. These vehicles are now military vehicle collector's items. And here is a 1952 Willys Overland Model M38. It's brought to us here by the Arizona Historical Military Transport Association. And I'm pretty much just letting this video run exactly as I took it, though without the sound. You don't need to hear what I was saying while I was filming it. I was trying to get some of the detail in here, though the camera resolution probably isn't the best. I need another camera, I know that. Anyway, behind it though is a TBF Avenger, but here you go, 1952 Willys Overland M38 with the owner's name right there. Really in good working condition. There were other Jeeps here, more of World War II vintage. This one is newer, about the Korean War era. And there you see Lula Bell. And I proceeded to flip through this book a little bit. There's the Arizona Motor Pool. Some other little facts and details. And I love this picture. You know, people just love their Jeeps. And a little bit of detail there. Now, you might think that this plane coming into view is a Grumman TBF Avenger. Well, it's not. It is instead a General Motors TBM-3E. The Avenger was designed and built initially by the Grumman Company and designated TBF. However, since Grumman's facilities were straining to produce enough of their fighters for the Navy, it was decided to ask General Motors to open another production line for the design. The General Motors version was designated the TBM, but was otherwise identical. The Avenger first entered combat during the Battle of Midway, and despite a poor performance in that engagement, went on to be the primary torpedo bomber of the war. Later versions of the aircraft were designated TBM-3, had a more powerful engine, and the E variant, of which this is, was equipped with a special anti-submarine radar. Avengers continued to serve in the U.S. Navy well into the 1950s. And here we have the Grumman F14 Tomcat. The F-14 Tomcat was the Navy's first swept-wing fighter. It came about due to the failure of the F-111B Aardvark, which was a navalized version of the Air Force's F-111 Aardvark. The main problems with the F-111B was that it was simply too heavy. During congressional hearings for the aircraft, Vice Admiral Thomas F. Connolly, who was then Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Air Warfare, responded to a question from Senator John C. Stennis as to whether a more powerful engine would cure the aircraft's woes. He responded by saying, "There isn't enough power in all Christendom to make that airplane what we want." Hence, Grumman came on the scene and developed what would become the F-14 Tomcat. The F-14 Tomcat was based around the large AWG-9 radar and the AIM-54 Phoenix missile. This radar system gave the F-14 the capability to lock onto and fire at 6 separate targets at the same time. A test was made on November 22, 1973, when 6 missiles were fired within 38 seconds at Mach 0.78 and 24,800 feet. 4 scored direct hits. The F-14 Tomcat entered service on September 22, 1974, and it remained in service until September 22, 2006. Currently, the only nation that uses the F-14 is the Islamic Republic of Iran. To prevent Iran from acquiring spare parts, it was determined that all surplus F-14s would be shredded. As I moved on from the F-14 Tomcat, I took in some more of the aircraft that are here. But there is simply just too much, even in this main hangar, for me to show you. You really have to come to the Pima Air Space Museum yourself and see it all. This is a North American F-107A. This was to be a new all-weather fighter bomber. One of the interesting things about this aircraft is because the intakes were above the cockpit, the pilot was ejected through the bottom in the event of an emergency. Here we have everybody's favorite, the SR71 Blackbird. Originally displayed in an outdoor pavilion by itself, it is now indoors in the main hangar. And not only do they have the SR71, they also have the GTD-21B drone. This drone was launched from a modified A-12 designated the M21. That aircraft was flown by the CIA. After a fatal accident involving a drone and an M21, they were modified to be launched from B-52s, and this drone was modified to be launched from a B-52. Only 4 missions with the D-21 drone were conducted over the People's Republic of China. And here we have a mock-up of an SR-71 Pilot sitting in the cockpit. SR-71 pilots had to wear pressurized flight suits. This was necessary because the SR-71 was flown at altitudes of over 60,000 feet. SR-71 flight suits were in fact worn by early shuttle astronauts. This was done to protect them in the event of shuttle depressurization. Just look at the design and detail of that suit. That is really incredible. These guys were practically astronauts. This SR-71 on display here at the Pima Air Space Museum is the second one built, and it is the oldest survivor. Here we have a Republic Thunderbolt Flash. RF-84F Thunder Flash. And here we have an aircraft that was originally designed to destroy Soviet tanks in the Cold War, but went on to see great fame in the Persian Gulf War, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and the fighting in Afghanistan. This is the A10 Thunderbolt II, commonly called the Warthog. There's that big gun.
You look at the newer version.
And this is a lightweight version of the main weapon on the A10 Thunderbolt II. It was designed to be carried inside a pod on lighter aircraft such as the F-16. But they realized in testing that it was impossible to aim, and thus it was canceled within a few days. That is believed to be the tail end of the world's largest paper airplane. It flew for about 30 seconds, reaching speeds of nearly 98 miles per hour before it suffered structural failure and crashed. How's that for a science project? This is the Douglas B-18 Bolo. This model is a B-18B number 38-593. She spent the early part of World War II on anti-submarine patrol, and in 1943 was used as a light transport. She was retired and struck from inventory in 1945. She then was operated as a firebomber from 1954 to 1970. By September 1969, she was in storage at Phoenix Goodyear Airport and was delivered to Pima on 5 September 1976. Here we have a DASH, acronym for Drone Anti-Submarine Helicopter. I have not seen one of these in some years. These were carried on World War II destroyers to extend their life. And in fact, one of these was carried by the Gearing-class destroyer USS Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. You can see that destroyer on display at Battleship Cove in Fall River, Massachusetts. And I really suggest if you go to Massachusetts and you want to see military stuff, go to Battleship Cove in Fall River. And that concludes part 1 of my visit to the Pima Air and Space Museum. Next up, we're going to take a walk outside. We're going to see such aircraft on static display as the Super Guppy, as well as the Air Force One for Presidents John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. This is the plane that took President Kennedy's body back to Washington. From there, we are going to go into the 390th Bomber Group's Memorial Museum. And there we will get to see a B-17G named I'll Be Around on static display.